What's up everyone, it's Dakota and welcome back to another modern video. And I was going to be doing Yawgmoth or, the Rhinos deck that have both been doing very well since the bannings. And as you can see, the deck on your screen is neither of those decks. That's because as I was checking like the metagame and everything, Rakdos Scam is actually back up to like a I think it's 11.5% over the last 30 days, and then like upwards of like 13.5 over the last week. And this result, this first place result, is from about 2 weeks ago as well. The deck that we're going to be looking at, and it's crazy to think that this deck kind of fell off the face of the earth to start. I think, understandably so for a lot of people, that it would just kind of, suck a little bit more because Fury had gotten the axe and everything. And well, I'm not going to say the deck obviously got better because it's going, I don't think it's ever going to reach, 20+% like it had for, months straight. It definitely seems like Rakdos Scam is kind of poised to continue to be a top player in the metagame, which is kind of a crazy idea if you think about it. So today we're going to look at a Rakdos Scam deck and kind of see some of the changes and stuff that it's made to continue to warrant that double-digit metagame share. Of course, before we get too deep into the deck, if you're not already subscribed to the channel and you want to see more videos like this, also other Modern and Pioneer content, as well as other longer form content, please consider subscribing to the channel, ring notification bell, do all that fun stuff. Go to the links in the description down below. You'll find a link to the deck list and the Discord server as well. So, Rakdos Scam, nothing new to the indoctrined Modern player, unfortunately. But for those new, I guess, new to the format, Rakdos Scam is kind of hinged on the fact that this is like a Rakdos mid-range deck that just has the ability to turn one, get two enter the battlefield abilities from Grief, and basically decimate your opponent's hand, scam them, if you will, out of playing an actual game of Magic. You do this by casting Grief for its evoke cost by exiling a black card from your hand. You look at your opponent's hand, you take a card from there, and then with the evoke trigger on the stack, because how you stack it, you resolve its enter the battlefield ability before its evoke trigger. You then cast a Not Dead After All or an Undying Evil targeting the Grief. And like not dead after all says that whenever until end of turn, target creature you control gains when this creature dies, return to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. Then create a Wicked Roll token attached to it, which gives the creature +1/+1, and then when this aura is put into the graveyard, each opponent loses 1 life. So basically, you end up with a 4/3 menace on turn 1, and your opponent's 2 best cards, and more than likely cards that would actually be able to interact with said Grief, just get stripped from their hand, and they essentially kind of have to get lucky or, what have you, into actually getting an answer for Grief. While this normally would be not necessarily a really good strategy. I mean, it's very powerful, obviously, where you take away all your opponent's interaction, they're basically forced to draw a third or even a fourth piece of interaction to actually deal with the Grief in a lot of cases. The other cards in this strategy synergize very well together to make it a really hard experience for your opponent to actually try to claw their way back and win the game. So, of course, we have Ragavan in this deck. The best one drop in Modern, I would still argue, is probably one of the best one drops in Modern. Just from everything that it does, the ability, the upside, really to run away with the game with an unchecked Ragavan. Even if your opponent deals with Grief, they have a real choice of dealing with Ragavan or the Grief itself. Obviously, Ragavan a little bit easier, but for the cost and all the advantage and stuff you're going to get, and all the mana that you're going to end up netting over the course of like a few turns, Ragavan is just super hard to stop at that point. Getting to like some of the 2-drops, you have like Dauthi Voidwalker and Orcish Bowmaster. We've seen Voidwalker put in work, about 6 months ago or what have you, at the Pro Tour, where Dauthi Voidwalker, like in the Tron matchups, just takes like their Karn, takes their Ulamogs, and then ends up casting these big flashy spells. But on top of that, like Dauthi Voidwalker does a very good job of kind of mitigating some of the pressure and that Rhinos can put on in a way that, if they cascade and do their thing, and they're not getting rid of the Dauthi Voidwalker, you're able to get rid of their Crashing Footfalls, and then you can have your Dauthi Voidwalker turn into 2/4/4 Rhinos. you can basically shut off like some of the other like graveyard based decks, like Yawgmoth being a big one, having kind of a hard time dealing with Dauthi Voidwalker. Obviously it can, but it messes with their Undying synergies, which is really unfortunate for Yawgmoth players, me. Uh, so overall, it's just like an annoying card, and it can just be very aggressive as a 2 mana 3/2 that is virtually unblockable, can only block by other creatures with Shadow. And Dauthi Voidwalker is essentially the only other creature that's played in the format that has Shadow, that sees any competitive play anyway. So Dauthi Voidwalker just super annoying to deal with, and another super aggressive piece that kind of curves well with Grief on 1, like Voidwalker on 2. You have Orcish Bowmaster to punish people playing like the Ring and playing cantrips. On top of that, just getting to ping some of the 1 toughness creatures. And of course, if your opponent is drawing multiple cards a turn, you can even pick off even bigger and bigger creatures, or go straight to the face and increase your clock even more. And then also it bringing a token with it and gradually adding more power to it. Multiple Bowmasters kind of getting to stack up as well. Make it just a really annoying card to deal with, and a card that you can't really efficiently deal with. Because even if you deal with a Bowmaster, after a few triggers, you still have like a 3/3 or a 4/4 army left behind that is arguably more difficult to deal with than the Bowmaster itself. You have 1 Bone Crusher Giant, just as this kind of flexible like removal slash like fits in the curve and remains like aggressive. While we're kind of like building out this curve, where without really doing anything, you can go like Grief on 1, you can go Voidwalker on 2, Crusher on 3, just casting Bone Crusher Giant into like Shielder of the Apocalypse, and this board is just like filled with must answer threats that your opponent really can't deal with efficiently just from the fact of like turn 1 Grief. Even getting to like play this curve of like Ragavan, Voidwalker, Bowmaster, Bone Crusher, heck, even like Magus of the Moon as like a one of, just to like screw your opponent over. I mean, it's been years since Blood Moon has kind of taken the stage in Modern, at least as a thing that you need to like keep in mind. And still, like Magus of the Moon / Blood Moon can just get people and end a game by like virtue of like your opponent like not playing, kind of like an original scam in like a way. But you're actually able to play around this and see this coming. We mentioned Shieldred, super powerful 4-drop, 4 mana 4/5, really hard to kill, and then also just winning a lot of combat, and even like in the worst case, like it actually trades up for a creature as well, if that wasn't annoying enough. You get kind of paid off a little bit by like cards like Fable, the Mirror Breaker, just getting to discard cards to draw cards, gain some life, and of course forcing your opponent, if they're going to cantrip, they're going to continue to lose life, and even on their draw steps and stuff, they're going to lose even more life, making your clock even harder to stop, without something like a board wipe like Supreme Verdict or Wrath of God or something like that. Moving on to the other spells, you have Fatal Push, Lightning Bolt as your removal options. We've seen like in the early iterations of like Rakdos mid-range, where we would see like Unholy Heat when you play like Baubles, you have Dragon Rage Chandler or whatnot. This deck opts for essentially efficiency in Fatal Push, getting to deal with creatures up to convert mana cost 4 or 4 or less. Excuse me. Ends up getting rid of Shieldreds. You really run into like problems with like Titans and stuff. Of course, there's probably some other 4 mana cards like more expensive than 4 mana cards, but 1 Fatal Push, like the cost here I think is pretty low for the upside that it offers. 3 Lightning Bolt obviously kills a lot of the things that you're kind of worried about. I mean, even in this deck alone, a Grief with a Undying Evil or a Not Dead After All Wicked Roll on it is like deaded by a Bolt, and everything except Shieldred. So I mean, Bolt, super efficient, has the flexibility to go to the face if it needs to, hit planeswalkers, things like that, very good. Went over Not Dead After All and Undying Evil. 4 Thoughtseize is, kind of like the signature of mid-range decks at this point in 2023 and 2024 Magic. Thoughtseize, take your opponent's best card, you lose 2 life, who cares? Like, you're taking their best card from them, and you're getting to follow it up with something powerful in the 2-drop slot, like a Dauthi Voidwalker or an Orcish Bowmaster, heck, even dashing a Ragavan to be able to leave up like Fatal Push, Lightning Bolt, or even maybe a Not Dead After All on your Ragavan as well. Just this deck has a few options, going into, in turn 2, going into turn 3. You have the new card from the Lost Caverns of Ixalan set, and Molten Collapse, really really sweet art, by the way. If you descended this turn, which essentially means like I believe if a permanent card went to your graveyard, I think from anywhere, but really like it's kind of like a fancy revolt in a way if you want to think about it. If you don't want to think about it too hard. But you destroy target creature or planeswalker at sorcery speed, so it's essentially like a Dreadbore with the upside of you can destroy target non-creature, non-land permanent with a mana value 1 or less. Of course, we see cards like Pithing Needle, which really wouldn't necessarily be good in matchups like this. But you can kind of like destroy Pithing Needles, you can destroy cookbooks, you can destroy most other like annoying like hate pieces in the format for this. You can even get like Grafdigger's cages and things like that. With this, for a pretty low cost for an effect that you already kind of want in your deck. That's it. Like you play 2 Terminate versus 1 Molten Collapse. The instant speed is very good in this scenario, and like Molten Collapse does have a little bit of upside. That you just don't want to play Dreadbore. You're just going to play this because you're going to be able to use one or the other, and sometimes you're going to be able to use both. Finally, for Fable the Mirrorbreaker, this is an enchantment that I thought should have been banned in Pioneer, and it definitely sees some modern play. We've seen it in the like 4-color/5-color creativity decks. You see it in like some of these other like red-based like mid-rangey strategies where just getting the 2/2, getting to attack, and generally make extra mana, and of course getting to discard cards that aren't very good in the matchup as well to draw more cards, or at least allowing you to dig to find more cards. Really only bad if you're like staring down a Shieldred, but of course really good if you have your own Shieldred. And just the potential to be able to have 2 flipped Fables on the battlefield. And I mean, this is also a really good turn 2 play when you lead on turn 1 Ragavan and your Ragavan goes unchecked. Getting to essentially create like 2 treasures a turn, ideally, and then have Reflection of Kiki-Jiki, get 2 of these flipped, make a ton of Fable tokens, and then of course you can kind of like copy like Dothy Voidwalkers, Bone Crusher Giants, so on, and just like basically take your opponent to the woodshed. Going on mana base, you have 20 lands, you have 4 Cliffs, 4 Blood Crypt, 4 Bloodstained Mire, pretty easy. You have 2 Marsh Flats and 1 Polluted Delta, so you have 7 fetch lands, able to go get your Swamp and any of your other, your Blood Crypt essentially, to have black and red. Of course, this deck is mostly black, so we kind of want access to these swamps whenever we need them. Also, the fact that we're playing a Magus of the Moon and then Blood Moon in the sideboard means that we definitely need access to multiple swamps because the rest of our lands are going to produce red mana. There's also a Verdant Catacombs, so there's 8 different options for fetch lands here. I believe that these are like all the black fetch lands. I don't know. There's obviously a competitive advantage because your opponent could like Pithing Needle, like Bloodstained Mire, and you have 4 fetch lands that do something else. That said, probably don't necessarily need to diversify this much. I'm sure there's like a competitive reason to, but if you don't have like a Polluted Delta or Verdant Catacombs, I'm sure playing like more Marsh Flats or one of the other ones that you have are just fine. Just important that they go and fetch a swamp if needed. Takenuma is like the only flex land that is in the main deck that can go and get you a creature or planeswalker. Can only obviously hit like a third of the deck, but getting back like an Orcish Bowmaster, getting back a Dothy Voidwalker, getting back a Shieldred and stuff, pretty big game. Sideboard, Chalice of the Void, Engineer Explosives for the Rhino matchups in particular. Curse Totem in for Yawgmoth. You have Blood Moon just because Blood Moon can win you a lot of like the grindy games if your opponent is not prepared for it. Hetsugu against, which this card just never likes to show up whenever I go over decks. Hetsugu consumes all, gets rid of, I believe it's all non-land permanents with converted mana cost 1 or less. So like pretty good against like the hammer decks and things like that, and people that are trying to do like Urza Saga shenanigans. Kolaghan's Command, virtually kind of the same thing. Magus of the Moon as another like Blood Moon in the deck. 3 Leyline of the Void for the graveyard decks, and 1 more Shielder of the Apocalypse. Just to again like kind of go bigger in some of those mid-range matchups. And that is Rakdos Scam for the modern format. Overall, Rakdos Scam has managed to claw its way back into the top spot, not even just in the top decks, the top spot of the modern format after losing Fury. And I think at least I thought that Fury might have been good enough. Like Scam could exist. It just obviously isn't going to be that powerful, or nearly as powerful as it was before. And it turns out that even having necessarily less not dead after all / undying evil / whatever targets in the deck, it's still very powerful. You know that you can like combo these cards like Dauthi Voidwalker, and you can cast a spell with Dauthi Voidwalker, and then Voidwalker comes back, and you can essentially kind of keep your pseudo graveyard hate on the battlefield, and then still get to cast like one of your opponent's powerful spells if needed. Of course, like also just casting removal spells on your opponent, like on your opponent casts removal spells on your threats, especially trying to get rid of a grief. They can just end up like re-triggering the grief and losing the card that they used to try to kill it, and then getting thought seized as well. Makes life pretty rough for a lot of opponents. So this deck probably shouldn't exist. I guess if you're like a pretty strong mid-range player and you've been playing like Rakdos Scam and stuff, I'd continue to play it. Definitely at some point I would expect like grief to go, or just get rid of all these like undying evil effects and like make people really have to work super hard to kind of get those effects. But let me know in the comments down below what you think of Rakdos Scam. Of course, leave suggestions for any other decks that you want to see. I got a suggestion for Yawgmoth on the last video, and I think that is the next deck that I'm going to look at next week, unless I get some other suggestions and stuff. So be sure to leave them in the comments down below. Leave a like on the video if you enjoyed, and I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you all in the next video.